Lorraine and author of Unleash Your Supernova, available at your favorite bookstores. I'm also a mother of four, the founder of Raine magazine, Pink Kangaru, the Raine School of Fashion, and Nova Lorraine International. I am here with one of my favorite people in the world, my co-host, Ryon Anderson, founder of Ryon Esquire, a business and peak performance coaching and consulting company. He'll be joining me as my partner in crime as we help you unleash your supernova. If you end up liking Ryon as much as I do, you can get more by checking out RyonEsquire.com. And that's Ryon, R-Y-O-N, Esquire.com. So join the fun live every Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern as we help you increase creativity, beat burnout, and happily survive the roller coaster of creative entrepreneurship. This is the companion show to the book, Unleash Your Supernova, your go-to guide for immediately usable tips on mindset, creativity hacks, decreasing stress, and unlocking your limitless potential. If you miss us on Fridays on BBS Radio, no problem. Make sure to download and subscribe to the Unleash Your Supernova podcast. Hey, Ryon.
Hey, how's it going, Nova?
Good. What's new?
I know we kind of talked about this morning, but, it's kind of one of those weeks. Not busy. We have, oddly enough, we've had terribly bad weather down here in Texas. So snow, ice, all that kind of good stuff. I had a dermatology appointment on Wednesday. My dad did too, and we were going to go together, right? And, wisely, my dad decided to cancel because snow, and there actually ended up being a 133 car pileup, not with the direction he was going, but kind of up by where he's at. So, yeah, smart choice, right? Well, yeah, I know, smart choice. I know. It happens to us occasionally, Nova. It does. So, I do my typical thing. I call a Lyft, go to my doctor's office, and this is the great thing about Lyft is it allows people like me to get places we need to go on demand, right? Can't see, can't drive, so therefore you have people take you around. The bad thing about things like Lyft, and this is something that people just don't realize, is it's just good enough for you to hang yourself, right? So the second time I've taken a Lyft to the doctor's office, I know, by myself. And, we go and it tells us the doctor's office is on the right. So I get out and we're there and lo and behold, the doctor's office is actually across First Street. It's on the left, right? And I didn't know this at the time. So I'm like, luckily some, citizen took pity on me and was like, oh, it's across the street. So we crossed the street, got to the doctor's office. But that's kind of stuff that happens whenever, with the technology. If you can see, no problem. You get out, you see the doctor, oh, it's across the street. You go across the street, no big deal. I get out, and I'm like in a sea of blackness, right? Like I have no way of figuring out where I am unless I know exactly where my starting point is. So, luckily it all worked out. It was good. I mean, I now know where the doctor's office is for sure, which is on the left side of First Street, not the right side, so I can get my drivers there. But, it was kind of part of my, harrowing week, and I would like to, I kind of wish I could say it was harrowing, but that's kind of the unfortunate reality with how it goes sometimes when you can't see, right? Technology many times is just good enough for you to look like you're independent, but it can kind of put you in some dangerous situations.
Look like you're independent.
To look like you're independent, yeah. Like, oh, great, Uber and Lyft, fine people can use it. Yeah, we can, but you might end up like on the wrong side of town and have no idea that you are in gang country. So, yeah.
Well, no, I can definitely relate. There's been plenty of days where GPS has put me on so you're on a one-way street and it's putting you in the opposite direction. And you're like, wait, why can't y'all figure this out? So, yeah.
And I live in downtown, right? And the reason I bring that up is because, you cannot get a better address system in a city than downtown. Right, like numbers. Okay, right, what I mean, often the numbers are tell you what side of the street they're on, and then the name of the street tells you where the door is facing. So if it's 311 West Fifth Street, that means the door faces Fifth Street. Like you can't. And I'm like, how can they mess that up so bad? Like it confuses me to no end. Yeah.
Well, I am still trained to pay attention to all the landmarks when I'm driving or walking.
Yeah.
And I have to thank my parents for that. I remember as a kid, we would be piled up in the back seat of the car, and my parents would do errands on the weekends. And it was about a 30-minute drive from our house. And we'd be either chit-chatting, falling asleep, who knows what was happening in the back seat. Like 30 minutes is forever for a little kid, right? But my father would say, pay attention to what's around you. So if you're ever lost, you know how to get home. And so that's still ingrained in my head. And so even if I use GPS to get somewhere once, like I literally the next time try to memorize, my way there. So the next time I don't need GPS. So I'm one of those that I do not want to ever be dependent solely on GPS. But nowadays, I mean, it is what it is.
I am too. It was 2 stories. Well, the first one was like, when I moved downtown 5 years ago, I had a friend that's lived down here probably 4 years longer than me, and I figured out the address system, and within 2 days of downtown because it was easier than using the GPS to navigate. And like you, I didn't want to be dependent on it. That was the first point. Second point, I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Texas, right? I mean, Derry, 30 miles or 15 miles from the closest town, like off the paved road, right? And so you're talking about essentially driving by landmarks. Back before GPS, I mean, that's literally how we drove. It was like, like if you see the suicide cow, because there was a cow on top of a roof, like you're on the right way. If you see the dilapidated trailer house on the right, it's the next dirt road on the left. Like that's exactly how we navigate. We got everybody there, but I mean, there was none of this. Like we didn't even have road numbers back in the day, but I mean, as far as the country roads, right? So that's funny that you mentioned the landmarks because you forget how you used to do it back before technology, right?
Right. That's so true. That's so true. Well, let's dive into, I'm still laughing at those descriptions. Let's dive into.
It's because the first time we drove up on it, we just briefly looked and there's this damn cow on the roof. And it just looked like it was getting ready to jump off. And because once you look for another second, you can tell it's plastic. But that first second, you're like, what is that cow doing? And so it got dubbed in my family the suicide dairy.
The joys of growing up in a small town.
I'm telling you, right?
All right. So today's topic that we're going to dive into is advice that changed everything. Okay. So just think about that. Hold that for a second. I'm going to read a passage from the book, Unleash Your Supernova. The accountant at the company I first worked for had become a dear friend. When I told her my plans for leaving the organization and what I wanted to pursue next, she gave me a valuable piece of advice. I will never forget that morning. We were riding up in the elevator heading to start our day at the office when I tentatively shared this unexpected news with her. Once I got it all out, she was overjoyed with my decision to follow my heart and said, no matter what you do moving forward, remember one thing. Tell everyone you meet what you want to do. You'll be surprised how many people will want to help you. So that starts that section of the book, Advice That Changed Everything. So for those of you who are listening, you're going to have to read the rest. You have to get the book and read the rest, see what happens. But I'm going to ask you, Ryan, was there someone or some point in your life where there was advice that you had gotten that really changed the trajectory of your path?
I was thinking about that, and I've actually thought about that question before because in the coaching industry, this is a topic that comes up quite frequently, actually. And honestly, I cannot really look back through conversations I've had and come up with like a single piece of advice that really changed my life. Which, by the way, I thought yours was amazingly profound. It really, but while you're reading it, but I didn't really get any like that. I mean, I had amazing guidance and mentorship as a kid, kind of as far as mostly how to be a decent person and all that kind of stuff. Not necessarily a business, but I guess what I did was, I found role models outside of my circle, whether it was role models for the type of man that I wanted to be, right, or the type of athlete that I wanted to be, or how I wanted to conduct myself in public. And then as I went on to my professional career, how I wanted to run a business, run a business with character, integrity, customer first, all that kind of stuff. And then, coaching, my different coaching philosophies. And so I really ended up finding mentors through books, through podcasts, word of mouth, right? And so
right.
I can't, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Yeah, I really can't say I had one specific like person. Like it was just one piece of advice, but I definitely did like through my own education, because I had things that I wanted to work out and wanted to improve, and that's really where I found a lot of my mentorship, my guidance, my philosophy of life. Now, I mean, it's in many ways it's very different than when I grew up. So.
That's interesting that there isn't like something that jumps out at you. I clearly remember that day in the elevator with my colleague and what she shared with me and the events that followed. But then I also remember as a kid, either my parents saying something over and over again that stuck with me, or even just overhearing a conversation. And so I think, when we think of advice, we tend to think of when there's a person standing in front of us or over the phone or whatever, nowadays FaceTime, and they're sharing whatever, the quote or two or paragraph with you, for you to follow. But I love how you said that, your advice, you would say came from books or podcasts and, or sometimes it's just a stranger. I think it's so important for us to recognize that words of wisdom don't always come directly as we would expect it,
Right.
and a lot of times they can come from a stranger. It can be someone standing behind you in the supermarket and you ask them a question and they say something that's pretty profound, right? So I love that we can get advice from all sorts of sources. I am a huge book reader. I love books. When you said that, it was like bling, 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 all these books that I've read and, the nuggets of information that I got out of it. So I'm going to challenge you again, going back to your podcast or going back to one of the books that you've read. Which podcast or which book stood out to you in terms of something that you really pulled away that you've used in your life?
Before I answer that question, I want to address something that you just mentioned that I think is super important, as far as like finding those nuggets, essentially inspiration just throughout life. And it's one of the things that I think once you decide to make that change and then therefore start seeking out the information that you need in order to educate yourself and make that change, I think what happens is it opens up your mind to essentially you're evaluating the information that's coming in, and you're evaluating, is this something that's beneficial to my goal, or the change I'm trying to make, yes or no? And so I think by really by essentially making that decision to grow, to change, in whatever direction that may be, it allows you to start looking for the information, and therefore you find it in that person, like say in the grocery line, right? Or that stranger walking down the street, or the book, or the podcast, right? Because your mind's open our mind's, I guess, subconsciously, actively seeking for any information that's going to move it towards its goal, right? And that's the power of really essentially making decisions. That's the power of, I guess, having a goal, having a direction, because the mind starts looking for ways to get you there. So I just thought that was important because that tied in nicely to what you just said. Back to your challenge, challenge accepted. Really, the most recent one, I know. The most recent one I can remember, and you and I have discussed this, a lot, is when I read, give me a second, I'm blanking on his name, James, what's the Atomic Habits? James Clear. James Clear book, Atomic Habits, right? And for me, it was identity, right? And it was, really, identity breaks down, it's the way we view ourselves and our role in the world is what our identity really truly is, right? And our identity is usually set fairly young. You can change it, but you have to really work hard at it. But it's one of those things where, like, I realized how much my identity was still that 11-year-old kid that wanted to be the NFL quarterback, right? And as I got older, I realized it changed from like the physical traits, how far you can throw a ball, how accurate you are, to the soft skills traits, right? Leader of men, uniting people behind a vision, right? Working. And so like that was really life changing me. It's this way. It changed my perspective a lot. And once you change your perspective, your world changes, right? So it was life changing. And the reason is because it really allowed me to embrace who I am at my core. And it's still the NFL quarterback, but more importantly, it's those skills. leadership, it's that uniting people behind the vision. Like, and once I guess not only embraced it, but then I had words to describe it and categorize information around, it really just freed me up, I guess, intellectually, emotionally, and socially to step into, the quote's always like, step into your greatness, right? I guess it allowed me to step into my greatness and fully embrace who I am, where I'm going in life, and then how I'm going to get there, right? So that would be my answer to your question.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's interesting that you bring up identity, because I think that shapes how we do proceed, in our day to day. And up until that point, it seemed like such a simple, quote that she had shared with me. And but it was profound. I was like, tell everyone what I want to do. I thought we just keep what we want to do to ourselves, so we're not
when you're young,
or
you're kind of embarrassed, right?
or, and I think identity does play a lot in that. Our tribe is a really big part of our identity and what shapes what we do, what we say, when we do it, and how we say. And according to James Clear, Atomic Habits, it's one of the hardest things to change. And so if you are a part of a tribe, a community, that's not something natural. Where either, no, you don't talk to strangers, and no, you don't look for advice outside of your bubble, right? You're not open to getting those messages or that information or those little nuggets of wisdom, outside of the people that you know in your life. That's part of the identity, part of the culture of the tribe that you've been, raised with, or the people that you spend a lot of time with. And when she told me that, I then, from that moment, for years, and then, I just started picking that habit back up. But for years, it would be, hi, I'm so-and-so, and this is what I want to do. Hi, I'm so-and-so, and this is what I want to do. And, at that moment, it was, I want to be a fashion designer, or I'm looking for funding, or I want to open a store. Like, whatever that goal was, it was, hi, this is my name, and this is blah, blah, blah. And that had taken me so far, because people get excited when you share what you want with them. Yeah. They want to naturally help you. And you just never know. I mean, that person might know someone who knows someone. And actually, she knew a designer in New York who, he wasn't a fashion designer, but he was a designer. And he led me to someone who was instrumental in helping me put a portfolio together, which led to all these other things that happened thereafter. And she was an accountant. Like, I had no idea that she would be.
You never would have pictured you were actively looking for her, right? Never.
Right. Yeah. And so I just think that it's so important for us to be open-minded, when we get up in our day, to set an intention for the day of what you want, and be willing to have that conversation, be willing to be open to people around you. And actually, I'll tell you a recent story. And so a few months ago, I was sharing my book with someone out of the UK, and to see if I would be a good fit to speak, for their membership. And she brought something up that had to do with fashion. So again, it had nothing to do with the book. And it reminded me of this idea I had, and I hadn't shared it in months. And I said, you know what? I'm going to share it with her. She seems to have an interest in this. And so I shared with her this idea I had of this art exhibition that I wanted to put together to help bring awareness for mental health. Well, long story short, here we are 4 months later. She's now an advisory team member to my fashion brand that I'll be launching this summer. Like, okay, that started with a conversation about my book, me being okay and open enough to share with her my vision and dream of this exhibition, which then led to this bigger and broader goal. And so I think, again, if we wake up with intention and wanting to share what we want with the right individuals, right? And that's using your gut, right? And, you'd be surprised what happens.
Yeah, and you said something else there too that it was subtle, but I think it's something that needs to be said, because we're in such a hustle culture, especially here in America. It's all about time management, where your hours go, and all yada yada yada. And the reality is, like, when you're open to those experiences, guess what? Those experiences happen usually not on your schedule, and they're usually going to interfere with something you have scheduled. And those relationships that not only take time to foster, with those conversations, when you're telling people like what you want to do, they take time to explain. I mean, and I think, really when you're open to those experiences, I think the flip side of that is, you can't be leading your life based on a calendar solely, because if you're always rushing to get somewhere else, you're missing out on those like moments, right? Those experiences,
right.
that potential to meet that person that could change your life, because your head's down, you're in your phone, and you're running to your next meeting. And I think, trust me, hustle is important. I mean, like, a lot of people do not work hard enough, but a lot of us that are like, in like yours and mine role, we probably work too hard from the standpoint of like, we work too hard in our business and on our business. And so I don't think we step back enough and give ourselves enough time to allow those, I guess, moments of kismet to like, the universe is like, oh, here, this person you need to meet, I'm going to put them in your life. Do not walk by them and ignore them. I think that's super important to remember too.
I love that you brought that up. I mean, there's something that I have in the book. Actually, I'm going to read this. When out and about, keep alert.
Almost like we planned this, right?
Almost like we planned this.
Almost.
We share a brain. When out and about, keep alert and be ready to notice the little things around and the strangers to say hello to. This may be hard at times, as we are often distracted with our mobile devices. Trust me, if you sacrifice a little time away from emails and social media to stay focused on your surrounding environment, you'll find the breadcrumbs you are looking for. And so it's so funny you said that. I'm like, did he? He must have read the book.
It is almost like I read that section. It really is. That's hysterical. I mean, it's almost like I verbatim did it.
Yeah. It's so true. I think that we are often distracted. Our heads are down. It may be, in the true sense or just metaphorically. And that goes back to the statements that we said, where you are. Are you at the coffee shop? Maybe going through the drive-through and having a conversation with the cashier, and be willing to take a moment to stop and have a conversation. And then that sometimes naturally leads into something else. And what I also want to say is, yes, we have our goals, we have our desires, we have our wants, but so does everyone else. And you never know when you are the catalyst, where you are the person that gives the advice to change someone's life. So there's a gentleman that we both know by the name of Chris, who shared a very simple statement with someone who was really down in his life. And he said to him, again, this seems really simple, just put one foot in front of the other. And that's what that person needed to hear at that moment. And then years later, that day where he heard those simple words, it clicked, something clicked. And this gentleman was, homeless. And I mean, he went from stardom to the like lowest of lows. And he just needed that piece of advice. He just needed someone to pay attention that day. And Chris, who thought he was just giving out, simple words of wisdom, actually helped change his life. And so be cognizant that not only are you out there looking for, those individuals that you could get information from, but other people are looking for you too. And so pay attention, be that voice, that someone needs that day as well.
It breaks down to two simple things: giving and receiving. And the reality is you need to balance of both. I mean, I've always given a lot to the way I'm a horrible receiver. I had to learn how to receive gifts gracefully, whether it was compliments, whether it was a physical gift, whatever it may be, right? But the reality is, like, they're both equally important, and you need to do both gracefully, graciously, and with humility in many ways. And I think that's very much what they said, Chris, because he's very much a giver I think he receives quite well too. But I think it's really important to remember both those, because the reality is sometimes in life you're going to be the person giving those words of wisdom, that advice, that information, and sometimes you're going to be the person that needs to receive it. And if you do both well, then hopefully the universe takes care of you and you live a really amazing, productive life.
That's right. I agree 100%. And this would be a good time for us to bring up our sponsor, Pink Kangaru. Pink Kangaru is a podcast network, newly launched, and that's Kangaru with a U. And for those of you who are looking to turn your brand into a podcast or are ready to level up your podcast and turn it into a brand, then definitely check out pinkkangaroo.com. And that's Pink Kangaroo with a U.com. It's a community of wild thinkers. So if you think outside the box and think your listeners do too, definitely check out pinkkangaroo.com. So back to the topic at hand. We have some questions that were sent in by our listeners. And, Unleash Your Supernova is about tapping into your inner brilliance to release the greatest version of yourself, right? We are talking about ways to increase your creativity, increase your productivity, and at the same time, happily survive the journey, the roller coaster, the marathon of creative entrepreneurship. So we have a lot of creatives and entrepreneurs that listen to our show and are at a point of either pivoting, from their full-time position to a startup, and or are just a few years in on the journey of entrepreneurship. And so they've sent in some questions for us. So the first one is, what piece of advice would you give to college graduates who want to become entrepreneurs?
This is a good one because it's not one that I came up with. It's one that I've actually heard someone else say, and I think it's really, really important and profound. And in some ways, it depends on where you are in life. But if you're graduating college and like you're single, like as far as not tied down marriage-wise, kids, essentially commitments, right? Whether it's a financial commitment, whether it's a long-term relationship commitment. That's the time in your life to try something, right? Because it's like business-wise, right? To try starting a business, or maybe it's try if you went to business school and you wanted to be an actor, maybe try acting. It's the time in your life to try because you're probably used to living fairly frugally because of college. You haven't gone out and bought the big house, bought the big car, have the spouse with the kids, and so you can try, you can fail, and it's probably not going to cost you a lot. It's probably not going to set you back very much. Versus by the time you're 40 and you're wanting to start a business, and now you have like a huge monthly salary that you have to be able to make to support your family, and that's so much more stress, and it makes you make really poor decisions that may or may not break your business, right? So I think that during that time, it's a good time to try those things, because here's the thing: you can always get a job, but you can't always quit a job. And so I think that's something that I wish I had known, when I was younger.
Oh, that was good. Oh, that's such good advice.
The last part was my thought, but the original part was someone else's idea. Yeah, so.
Yeah, no, that is a good time to take chances, and I, shortly after grad school, I went on to design school, and I worked for 3 years before, launching my fashion brand. And during that time, I was studying entrepreneurship, I was studying marketing, I was working on my business plan. But I was also working full time, and I had my son at the time. And shortly thereafter, a year later, I found out that I was expecting my daughter. So I had to figure out how to do that, as a young mom. And that was challenging, and thankfully I had the support of my parents and my in-laws and my husband and other family members. And so, that helped out tremendously. But, if you are coming out of school and you don't have that added responsibility, it is an excellent time to take that chance, to take that risk. And, a lot of times you'll have the support and fallback of your family and or friends. But I also want to say entrepreneurship right now is very trendy in terms of the word.
Yes.
And was trendy before COVID, but now is becoming almost a necessity due to the lack of opportunities there are for college graduates. But one thing I want to do is, for those that are truly interested, in becoming an entrepreneur, do your research, talk to other entrepreneurs, ask questions. see if it's truly right for you. The lifestyle, maybe if you're not the visionary, maybe you are the right hand, man or woman for someone else's startup, right? Or project. Every entrepreneur needs a great team, and they need entrepreneurial team members to help them get that off the ground. And so know yourself, know what your strengths and your resources, know the lifestyle that you want. Know if you want the burden of leading a team. I mean, when you start a company, I liken it to like giving birth to a child. That company has to be nurtured, it has to be fed, it has to grow, it has to sustain itself at some point. And so are you ready for that? And are you ready for the lives that are dependent on you, right? Your team and employees as well, for their livelihood. But by not knowing what's in store for you, you may be stepping into something that's not really suited for you. And then there are different types of entrepreneurship. I see creative entrepreneurship as using your creative gifts and talents to impact a community while you're making a livelihood for yourself, while that's able to support yourself. Or at the very least, you're doing it as a hobby. And so you can be a freelance artist, designer, dancer, coach, photographer, and not necessarily have to depend on supporting a huge team. But then you can be that individual that decides to start the next honest company, or the next Apple, or the next Google, right? The next Nike. And so again, there's a range of entrepreneurship. And I say first, do some deep diving and figuring out who you are right now, because we all change and evolve. But at this moment in time, what feels right to you? Do the research, work alongside another entrepreneur, ask questions so you have a better sense of what you're getting into.
Yeah, I agree. And don't be afraid to pivot, because most of us, our first idea was not the one that got us it's not the one we're currently doing. I mean, I know my first business was not coaching, so don't be afraid to pivot. True. Like there's no shame in shutting something down that's not working. Like that's the truth. Because it feels like a failure, because we go to school, right? Like you get something wrong, you fail. No. You figured out something that didn't work. You only fail when you stop, when you quit, right? And so as long as you reframe it and remember that, like, no, I just found something that didn't work, or I'm not good at. Let's go try something else. Then you're not a failure. Not a failure. You just quit on a bad idea. Those are two entirely different, I guess one's an evaluative, like, I'm a failure. Like that's evaluating yourself. That's a really terrible place to be. And the other one's just, a fact. This didn't work, and let's move to something that does. And I think it's important to remember that.
Yeah, not being afraid to pivot. Goodness knows I pivoted.
I know.
First major pivot. Yeah, I'm going to not finish my PhD. Yeah. I'm going to leave early and study fashion design. Like that was a big pivot for me.
That's huge. Yeah. Because your PhD was in psychology, right?
Yeah. Getting my PhD in clinical psych, that was a big pivot, and no regrets, because I did stay to finish my master's, and I use what I've learned in everything that I do. And but I knew it was through fashion that I was going to impact people in the long run. And it's so ironic that I continue to bring psychology back around. So, what's in you is in you, and that's not going to change. The how may change, the when
but not the why.
May change. Right. But not the why. And we went over that in our last episode. I want to jump into this next question because I'm really curious how you're going to answer this. Another listener sent in, what would you say are the top 3 skills needed to be a successful entrepreneur?
Top 3 skills. Oh, that's a really good question. The reality is, it's kind of like you're talking about what kind of entrepreneur are you is important, I think, and then kind of like, are you number 1 or number 2? To me, really, the biggest things that I think are important are the fact that you are willing to continually learn, to continue to ask questions, to not assume that you have the right answer to begin with, right? Like and that kind of that dovetails nicely to my second point, which is that humility, right? The fact that you are willing to look at your idea, whether it's a product, whether it's a service, and question it. Am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? How can I get better? Maybe I do need to actually ask for advice or help or read books and get better at what I'm doing, right? And that only comes with humility, because you think you know it all. Like, if you think you know it all, then there's no reason to look for everything, right? But if you know that there's brilliant people out there other than you, then you're willing to listen to those answers when they come about, right? So I think willingness to learn, grow and evolve. I think humility, and then grit. You know, that's a common one, but the reason it's a common one to be said is because it's so true. Because, like you said, creative entrepreneurship is a journey, right? It's all a journey. But the thing about journeys are they have ups and they have downs. And if you don't have grit to stick through with your passion when things are rough, when things look dire, when you're getting at 5 o'clock in the morning going, God, is this really worth it? Then, you're not going to be successful, because it's almost like the universe is testing you to make sure you're worthy of the greatness that's going to follow, by being persistent, right? And if you kind of look at it that way, that this is a test, and this is the universe testing me to see if I'm worthy of, changing the world, making all this great money, whatever your goal in life is, that makes it easier to then go on and overcome those challenges. But yeah, those to me are probably the 3 that I would say, at least this was those are my core for me and what have made me successful. Let's put it that way. And I think they would apply to a lot of other people, but I'm sure there's other things that I'm missing that would apply as well. How about you?
Ooh, right back at me. Loved everything you said, by the way.
Thank you.
The first thing that came to mind for me was you have to be a visionary. I feel that you have to be able to see a problem that exists and be able to come up with the solution for that problem, and do it in a way that's not done before. And so, which means you're bringing something to life that does not exist, and it's something that's going to provide value to a community in need. And that community can be micro or it could be global. But I feel that you have to be a visionary to be the lead entrepreneur. So I think that's something that comes to mind. And secondly, I would say, I don't know if this is second, but I will say resilience, because we are knocked down so many times because there is no path. You don't know, what the 3 bricks are that are going to magically appear in front of you as you continue to walk down this road. You're lucky if you see the next brick. And so you are stepping out on faith every single time.
And you're probably going to trip over one of those damn bricks too, by the way. It's just the way it goes, Where did that come from? Brick! I just land on your face. Yeah, that's just the way it's
right. It knocks you out cold. You're like, man, what was I thinking? So I think that you have to be resilient. You have to be able to, take the knocks, take the punches, and not stay down. And just be ready to get back up, absorb it a little bit. It might take a minute, it might take a few days, sometimes it may take a few years, but absorb it and come back and try again, and try again. I would say the third one, because as you were talking, I was like, ooh, how would I answer this question? I would say flexibility, because we, like you said earlier, we may start with an idea and we're like, boom, this is it. And we get out there and we're like, no, this isn't working. No one wants to buy this. And right. And then like, oh, I don't have any sales. I can't get any team members. I can't get any accounts. Like, what do I do? Do you just walk away? I think that going back to the visionary part of it, and you are doing something, like you truly believe you're doing something to impact someone else outside of yourself, then you are going to be willing to find a way. Like, be flexible enough to start over, to ask questions, to maybe pause and then apprentice, or do the research. And, there's a saying that says, bend like a bamboo tree, Because if you're flexible enough, the storm will never break you. Like you'll never snap, right? No matter how strong the winds are, you're going to just bounce back up. So I think that it's so important to be flexible with your ideas, to be willing, as you said, to pivot, to change, to pause, to get help, to be resilient, because it's so much a marathon. Like think about running, and I haven't run a marathon before, but I did do cross country, running 25 miles. What? And especially, oh my gosh, right? And without perfect conditions. I mean, even in perfect conditions, that's a challenge and a struggle. And so I think resilience is so important, because I liken entrepreneurship to a marathon. And then also being a visionary, being able to solve problems, to come up with ideas in new ways. So those would be the three things I would say.
Yeah. And like they kind of like it started. The reality is, it's what works for you. Like what I said works for me, what you said works for you. And, there are people out there who are like, oh, I agree with one of those, two of those, or none of those ideas, right? Because everybody's why is different. Everybody's how is different. And, it really, there's people who are motivated, by the fact, like, I'm going to cure cancer because I lost my mom from cancer, right? And they're completely driven by that. And so, were they a visionary? You can question that, but they have a goal, they have a mission, they have a why, and they're like, probably even obsessively driven toward it, right? And so, I think that's important to remember too. It's we're giving what works for us and what's worked, like in my case, what works for my clients. But I think it's important to find like your reasons why, and not only that, kind of what your gifts are, right? Like, if you're a visionary, that's great. If you're that number two, if you're that organization, that structure person, like, don't think you're lesser than that visionary. Because guess what? As a visionary, I love structure people because they do the part of the job that I absolutely hate. And the reality is, I couldn't go on and execute at the level that I want to execute without that person there, like creating that structure, making sure that like the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. I almost put that backwards.
So true.
Yeah. And so I think that's important too. Is like, don't be embarrassed if your skill set isn't that visionary. That doesn't mean you can't go on and be an incredible part of a team that is an entrepreneurial team that goes on, and conquers the world or conquers your industry or whatever it may be, right? And so I think it's important to remember too is we're giving ours, but that doesn't mean that they're the end all be all list.
Right. No, that's a very good point, because if you know your strengths, going back to knowing who you are and what you're good at, you can co-found and or you can complement your weaknesses with your team. And so I love working with those individuals that can execute, the operational minds, the structured and organized individuals, to allow me to continue to create and expand. So yeah, those are really good points. And we had a live call coming in from Joe from Pennsylvania. So let's take the question from Joe.
Hello, I'm a first-time listener, and this is an excellent show. I've been getting a whole lot of nuggets of knowledge out of it. I just wanted to call in and see how I'm an entrepreneur myself. I wanted to know how you guys keep this positive energy going and flowing throughout the ups and downs, the highs and lows of this entrepreneurial ride. You guys, any advice on that?
That was a great question. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, you take it first.
Yeah. Thank you for calling, Joe. And that really was an amazing question. A lot of it is starts with mindset, right? It's feeding yourself with positive information. As far as like reading books that teach you, right? Always looking for solutions rather than things that it's this way. When you find something that you're trying to solve, it's all about finding solutions rather than problems. Is probably the best way of phrasing it. But as much as anything, I think it's acknowledging that you're going to have those setbacks. You're going to have those ups and downs. You're not always going to be happy and cheery and everything, is unicorns and rainbows, right? Some days this entrepreneurial journey sucks. Like some days you just get beat down. It does, right? things don't work, money's not coming in, bills are coming in, the project's behind, and to know that, acknowledge that's part of the journey, I think is very freeing to know that you're going to have those. However, it's also important to remember to basically have that goal that we're talking about, that lighthouse that we kind of mentioned, that maybe in another conversation. Anyway, that kind of lighthouse of, this is the direction I'm going, this is where I'm working, this is a temporary setback, but if I continue to do the steps that I know will work, which is continue to come up with solutions, continue to be forward looking, continue to be an upbeat, positive person, because that's what positivity really is knowing that you're going to find that no matter what the situation, you're going to find a solution to the problem. That's what positivity is. Negativity is, no matter what situation, you're going to fail. Like that, so as long as you know you're going to come up with that solution given enough time, you will stay positive. At least it's kind of what's always worked for me. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that you're going to have those bad days and, accept it, embrace it. Just don't wallow in it.
So. Yeah, no, awesome. Those are really good responses, Ryan. I agree. I think that the key is not to stay down, to know that we're not meant to be, at that bottom rung and stay and indefinitely. And right. Just like a roller coaster, that's sort of how I see it. Like, you're going to have those highs, and then like out of nowhere, it's like, poof, you go down that, the slope at this incredible speed.
And your stomach goes with you.
And the stomach goes with you.
It does. Right? It does.
What just happened? Yeah. And then you're at that low point. And it's, like Ryan said, if you just stay forward looking and know that, okay, this is just like a little divot, it's going to take me a minute, but I know I'm not meant to stay down here. Like, you started this idea for a reason. You came up with this, solution for a problem that people really have, and let's just say the original idea, didn't stick, but then this is version number 3. Well, the problem still exists in your customer base, in your community. And if it's something that you truly believe in, that's going to add value in someone's life, why would you walk away? Right? So it's easy for us to walk away when it's just us, right? Like, I could be laying on the couch, reading my book, drinking my matcha, and I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's someone outside my window that needs help, I'm going to jump up and I'm going to help them. And so, yes, you may have, broken ankle or something like that, but you're going to drag yourself over to help them. And I feel like entrepreneurs, like true entrepreneurs that are doing something to solve a pain point, is going to push through the pain. Because at the end of the day, the reason why they started this was to help that person on the other side. So it's so important when you start something to make sure it's really bigger than you. And then know, as Ryan said, know that, yes, those valleys, those dips, they're going to come. Like, every great entrepreneur has had those really low days. And even when the media and the news shows that they're like living life, they are still having those down days. They're still trying to problem solve. And it's just that we're not seeing it. We're just seeing the glitz and the lights and the dollar signs. And so know, at every level, those down days happen. But it's so important to see the glass half full. Like, what in this situation can I learn from? Because there's really no such thing as failure. It's learning. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, I got to try something else. So what from this experience or situation can I learn from to apply? It's when we don't learn from those experiences, then you could say, maybe it was a failure. So if you look at everything as a learning experience and almost like a puzzle, like, oh, this is exciting. This puzzle piece didn't work. Let's figure something out. And especially when it's a sense of urgency, when there's money involved, it sort of pushes that creativity to the forefront. So just allow that to come. But yes, that was an excellent question. Thank you.
Nova said something that spurred 2 thoughts. One of them is, I think it's important to remember that positivity and negativity both are a choice. And if you want to be positive, it sounds trite, but you make choice, you choose to be, right? It starts with that.
Mm.
It is after you make the choice of I'm going to be positive. It's making those small choices throughout the day that are positive choices, and that takes practice to become a habit. Then once it becomes a habit, then it becomes a lifestyle. I think that is actually important to remember too. That it boils down to choice. As long as you have a choice, then you have control. And then the other point that she made with the roller coaster that I cannot remember what it was now. Crap, I can't remember.
The valleys.
Yeah, sorry.
Dips.
It was, yeah, it had something to do with the roller coaster. Yeah, it did. About ups and downs, and I don't remember now. Anyway, that was you just got one of my 2 points out of it. So.
Does that help, Joe? Are you still there?
Yeah, that was very helpful. I really appreciate those words of advice, and I'll keep those all in mind and try to stay positive. When I get those no's, when I'm trying to sell, just try to stay positive. And I look forward to the yes.
He says, like, every no is, one step closer to a yes. And I have a hard time, like that's definitely a salesperson thing to say. I have a hard time seeing it that way some days. But the reality is it's true. Like, eventually someone's going to say yes. Like and that's not a bad way of looking at it, but they embrace it way more than I would. But if that works for you, like, use it, embrace it, and go with it. Because if you're in sales are tough. Like, you're going to be told no a lot. I mean, and so, like, having a positive mindset, knowing that, if I do the steps correctly, if I follow the process, this will work. Like, that will take you so far in sales. Because it's a tough industry.
Yeah, you know what? I love that. And that made me think of how I'm approaching the no's now. And so before I would take it really personal and as a rejection, or what am I doing wrong? Do I need to change something? And now it's like, all right, cool. Like, I wasn't meant to do business with that person, because I really only want to do business with who I want to do business with, or this is not providing value for that person. And I really want to get this product or service in the hands of those that really need it, because I believe that there are people out there that really need it. So it's okay to get those no's, because you didn't create something for everyone. You didn't. You created for a specific audience.
That's a good point. That's a great point.
For a specific problem. And the more, as you said, the more no's, it's like, okay, it's clearing the path for those that really need it. And once I get to that target avatar, I now can just rinse and repeat. But sometimes it's a process to get to that bullseye customer. Yeah. But every no helps shape what that yes is going to look like.
I remember my other point, the roller coaster point. And this kind of goes into what actually dovetails nicely with these no's and yeses. If you're anything like me and you're an entrepreneur, you're always forward thinking. You're always like on to the next challenge. To me, I think it's really important for us to stop, take a breath, and acknowledge our successes, right? Because if we never really stop, acknowledge, kind of revel in our successes, first place, why the hell are we doing this? Second place, then you're always looking at the next problem. You're never feeling good about what you accomplished. And it's important to feel good and acknowledge that you've done well. You were successful. You overcame some challenge. And I think those celebrations are something that we as entrepreneurs need to be more cognizant of, because there's so much fewer in some ways than all the setbacks and problems that we deal with every day. So to essentially have that contrast and revel, I think that's super important too, in order to help foster positivity. That was the other point that I was trying to remember earlier.
I'm so glad you remember that, because that was so good.
Thanks.
That was no, it's so true.
And out of the two, it was the first point I had, and I was trying to not get the other one. By not forgetting the other one, I forgot the first one. Oh yeah. Welcome to my brain, people. Welcome to my brain.
No, it's so true. I think as entrepreneurs, we're so task and goal oriented, and we want to make this to work. We want this to win, and we want to get, the solution in the hands of those that need it, that we don't take the time to recognize the accomplishments, however small, and even the big ones. A lot of times we brush to the side because we're so busy going after the next thing, right?
Yep.
And it's so much easier to keep the glass half full. It's so much easier to have that positive attitude if you've held on to all of those accomplishments. You're like, Oh, no, that's all right. Look where I've come. Look how far I've come. Look how much I've accomplished. You've created
and they help you during those no's, during those bad times. I've done it before. I could do it again. Right?
That's right. That's right.
So, yeah.
Boom. Bomb drop, Ryan.
Hey, when I remember my genius ideas, I come across highly intelligent. When I don't, I'm a bumbling idiot, how's it go by genius? What is it? Something about a fine line. I can't remember how that quote goes. But, there's a fine line between genius and insanity. That's what it is. So, yeah, depending on which way I'm leaning determines which side I'm in on one particular, time of day.
Oh, man. All right, great. Thank you so much, Joe, for that question.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. It was a great question.
Yeah, really
all right.
good question.
This is my first time listening, but it won't be my last. I thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Good.
Now.
Thank you so much, man. We appreciate it.
Yep. Bye-bye. Oh, it's time to say
first
goodbye.
Call, right?
Wait, what was that?
I said that was exciting, right? First call.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah. First of many. So, listeners, if you have questions, jump on, go to bbsradio.com, check out our show, call in. We're here. We would love to, give you feedback on your journey, help support you on your journey. This is the Unleash Your Supernova live show. And check out the book. It's available in all major bookstores. You can pre-order it for the drop on March 16th. But this is what we're here for. So would love to hear from you live for those of you that want to call in. And I think this is bringing us to the close of our show, Ryan. I can't believe it's almost time to say bye.
It's flown by, hasn't it? Yeah.
And I had some other questions that we had prior to, that was sent in prior to the show. So we're going to have to get to those questions the next time around.
Next week.
But next week, that's right. Next week, Fridays, 9 p.m. Eastern. So if you guys are just joining us halfway through the show, the start of the show is 9 o'clock. You could check us out live, call in with your questions. And I'm going to have to give a plug for our second sponsor, the Raine School of Fashion. And it's a school of innovation and sustainability, and it launches March 1st. And so for those of you that want to be part of the future of fashion and learn more about fashion sustainability as relates to textiles, marketing, supply chain management, and much more, check out the raineschool.com. All right. Well, that's it for another show. Check out Ryan at ryonesquire.com. Those of you that want some amazing business coach mindset, peak performance advice. And that's Ryan, R-Y-O-N. It's late. You could clearly see it.
I know. My dear, dear friend Nova. My dear, dear friend.
My dear, dear friend Ryan.
I bring that up because every celebrity has a dear, dear friend that they've probably never met, but they're always dear, dear friends. So I will tell them about
dear, dear friend.
Dear, dear friend.
Oh, man. This is Nova Lorraine. This is Nova Lorraine, author of Unleash Your Supernova, founder of Raine Magazine, and my dear, dear friend,
dear friend, Ryan.
Ryan Anderson. Join us next week live on Unleash Your Supernova. And again, if you missed the live show, no worries. Check out the podcast. Download, subscribe so you do not miss an episode. And that's, again, Unleash Your Supernova podcast. Bye, y'all. Bye, Ryan.
Bye, everyone. Have a great week.